Hello, it's Ms. Huser from 8 Silver, and I'll be going over lesson 4 with you guys today. So, we have lots of equations that we're going to be working with today. So, let's go ahead and get started. So, it says, which of these different equations have the same solution as equation 1? So, let's go ahead and find the solution to equation 1. So, I'm going to rewrite this and solve for x. So x minus 3 equals 2 minus 4x. Now I want to keep my x variable positive. So I'm going to add 4x to both sides. And I end up with 5x minus 3 equals 2. Now this looks like a two-step equation. So we need to undo that addition, or that subtraction, by adding. So I'm going to add 3 to both sides. And I end up with 5x equals 5. Lastly, we need to undo this multiplication here. So I'm going to divide by 5 on both sides, and x equals 1. So if I wanted to figure out if these had the same solution as that equation, what I could do is work through each of these equations. Or what I could do is see if there's one maybe step I could make to see if our equations match. Alright, so let's work through this first one so you can better visualize what I mean by that. So I'm going to rewrite x minus 3 equals 2 minus 4x right underneath. So that's my original equation. If I look and compare, I notice that if I were to take my original equation and multiply each term by 2, it would then match the other equation. So what I could do is multiply by 2, and then I'd end up with that same equation. And then because it would match, I know that we would have the same solution. Alright, so equation A does match up, or does have the same equation. Now let's look at this next one. I'm going to do the same process. So x minus 3 equals 2 minus 4x. Well, I notice that my 2 disappears when I look at that next one. So if I were to subtract 2 from both sides, I end up with the same equation for equation B. So all I did was subtract 2 from both sides, and now I know, since just doing that one step, I know that we would end up having the same solution. Alright, now let's look at this one. So we end up with x minus 3 equals 2 minus 4x. Alright, well the first thing I notice is that my x minus 3 is now on the other side. So first we need to switch these. And I end up with 2 minus 4x equals x minus 3. Now if I look at this step here, it looks like they divided each term by 2 and took a 2 out to apply that distributive property. So I would have 2 parentheses 1 minus 2x equals x minus 3. So I was able to divide both my terms by the same number, pull that out, which is 2, and then now I would be able to apply the distributive property. And now that those match up, I know that they would eventually have the same equation. Now let's look at this last one. So x minus 3 equals 2 minus 5x. Well, I notice my x disappears on the left. So if I were to subtract, I accidentally wrote this wrong. If I were to subtract x from both sides, I would end up with negative 3 equals 2 minus 5x, which is matching up there. So since those now match, I know that they would eventually have the same solution. Alright, now let's move on to the next one. So here we go. Now we have two different, or the same equation, and it was solved two different ways. Now we need to see if the steps match up and if they're done correctly. And then we want to see, we'll just be able to notice if there's different ways to solve the equation. So here we go. Let's look at Claire. So let's see her first step. So from here to here, I noticed that if I look on the left here, we have 14x minus 2x. Well, those are like terms because they both have an x connected to them. So 14 minus 2 gives us 12. And then we have x to, we can't forget about the x that needs to stay there. So we're going to subtract or combine like terms. Alright, now from here to here, let's see what happens. Nothing changes on the right, so let's look at the left. Well, it looks like we found a number that goes into both of our terms here, and so that number would be 3. So we're going to take out a 3. So we're going to take out a 3, and when we do that, now we can apply the distributive property. Or maybe just divide by 3. We'll see what happens. So we're able to find a number that goes into both of our terms, and we're able to pull it out and create a distributive property there. Now from here to here, it doesn't look like they end up distributing because my 4x stays the same. So instead, they divided both sides by 3. Divide by 3. And now lastly, my 4x disappears on the left, so let's see. If we subtract 4x from both sides, we do end up with 1 equals x plus 9. So from here to here, we subtracted 4x. And then lastly, if we subtract 9 from both sides, we end up with a negative 8 equals x. So minus 9 from both sides. So this was done correctly. Now let's look at this one. Alright, she has the same answer, so let's see how Lynn solved it. Alright, so from here to here, they had that same first step, and they combined those like terms. And then our second step here, let's see what happens. Well, the left side stays the same this time, and it looks like over here, Lynn distributed that 3. Alright, now let's see what happens next. Well, I noticed that it goes from 12x plus 3 to just 12x. So if we subtract 3 from both sides, we would end up with just 12x on the left and then 24 on the right. So we're going to subtract 3 as that next step there. And then almost, I'm getting ahead of myself. From here to here, it looks like we would subtract 15x from both sides. Now, lastly, if we divide by negative 3 on both sides, we end up with x equals negative 8. Alright, so both of them solved it correctly. So it says, are both of their solutions correct? Yes. Explain your reasoning. They have the same solution. There we go. Now it says, describe some ways that they took that are alike or different. So I'm just going to talk through that. So it started off, they both combined those like terms. And then their last step, they both ended up dividing. But that was not necessarily the same. So at this point, they ended up taking out a 3 to make it a distributive property on both sides. And on over here, they just decided to distribute. So that is where things started to get a little different for the both of them. Alright, now we have 2 more examples. So it says that they solved this equation, but they some of their steps have errors. So we need to find the error, okay? So let's go ahead and do that. So this first step here, they combined the like terms. So they're good there. Now from here to here, let's see what happens. Well, I don't know what this, okay. So it looks like they subtract 5x from both sides. And you cannot do that, alright? So, subtracted 5x can't. And the reason why we can't do that is because it's in the parentheses. So we need to solve and simplify what's in the parentheses first before we can change anything inside. I'm just going to write, can't do that, but what I just said out loud was why. Alright, now let's see what Noah did. Alright, so first step, combined those like terms. That was a good step there on the left. Now on the right, looks like he distributed. Alright, so that's good as well. Now let's see what happens. Well, the 15x disappears over here, so that means we'd need to subtract. If I look over here, we end up with a 27x. So they added 15x when he was supposed to subtract. Alright, so there we go. Alrighty, now let's look at these last ones. So make your own steps. So I want you guys to pause and try and do this first one. And then I'm going to work through it, and there are going to be different ways to solve, okay? So you can do it the way I'm about to do it, or you maybe came up with a different way on your own. Alright, but I want you to go ahead and pause and try and solve this on your own first. Okay, here we are. So I'm going to go ahead and work through this. Now, I have fractions. That's scary. So let's figure out how we can make this less scary. Well, if I look on the left, I have my x variable right there, and I need to solve for that. If I look on the right here, I don't have an x. So what I can do is simplify what's on top there. So 5 minus 9 gives me a negative 4. Alright, it's starting to look not as bad now. Okay, so negative 4 divided by 2 gives me a negative 2. So I now have 12 plus 6x equals negative 2. Forgot the over 3. There we go. Alright, now if I have a fraction here and I want to get rid of that denominator, I need to multiply by the reciprocal. So I'm going to multiply by 3 over 1. Alright, now if I do that, these reduce to 1 or simplify to 1. So now all I have is 12 plus 6x on the left. And then if I put these both over 1, negative 2 times 3 gives me a negative 6. Which would then reduce to just negative 6. Alright, now we have a two-step equation. So let's undo this addition here. So we're going to subtract 12 from both sides. And we get negative 18 on the right. And then lastly, we need to undo that multiplication. So we're going to divide by 6 on both sides. And we get negative 3 as our answer. So as long as you got negative 3 as your answer, there are multiple ways that you could go about solving this. Alright, now let's look at our next one. I want you to do the same thing. I want you to go through and try and solve this, and then you can unpause it and watch me and see how I do it. It is okay to do it differently, okay? Alright, so the first thing I notice is the fraction. Where did my thing go? Okay, so my fraction here, I want to remove that. So in order to do that, I need to multiply by 3 over 1, which is my reciprocal. And I have to do that on the other side as well. Now remember, 3 over 1 is the same as just saying 3. So I'm just going to write 3 on the left here. So 3 times 1/3 reduces to 1. So on the right, I have 6x minus 54. And on the left, I have 3 parentheses x minus 4. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is distribute. And at this point, if you distribute, you can do that, or what you could do is possibly divide each term by 3. Alright, so actually instead of distributing, I am going to divide by 3. So this reduces to 1, and I get x minus 4 on the left. And then 6 divided by 3 gives me 2x. And then 54 divided by 3, let me get my calculator out just to double check that I do it correctly. I get negative 18 there. Alright, so on lesson 3 we kind of talked about our two options here. Well, since it made our numbers get smaller, that's why I decided to divide, and because each of my numbers are divisible by 3. So that is why dividing would be a nice choice here. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract x from both sides. Alright, then what I'm going to do is I need to get x by itself, so I'm going to add 18 to both sides. And when I do that, I end up with x equaling 14. And there you go. If you distributed, that's great. You hopefully still got 14 because that's what you should have gotten. Alright, last one, guys, bear with me. Here we go. So starting this one off, the first thing I see is this negative. So we have two options. We can distribute that negative because there's an invisible 1 there, or we can divide by a negative 1 on both sides. Does not matter which one. I'm going to go ahead and distribute it. So I end up with a negative 3x plus 12. Alright, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 3x to both sides. And I get 12 equals 12x minus, I don't know why I wrote a 9 there. Sorry. Here we go, minus 4. Alright, now I want to get my 12x by itself, so I need to undo this addition, or undo the subtraction. And I get 16 equals 12x. Now I need to divide by 12 on both sides, and I get 16 over 12 equals x. Now can we reduce this? Yes. 4 can go into, divide both of those by 4, and we get 4 over 3 for x. So there we go. Alright, now make sure you replay any part of the video that maybe you got a little confused on, and feel free to reach out to your teacher if you have any questions. Alright, have a good one.